Have you ever caught yourself daydreaming so vividly it felt more like a memory than imagination? If you're an INFJ, this isn't rare, it's daily life. INFJs don't just daydream for fun. Their inner world is like a theater of alternate realities, deep conversations, and sometimes even apocalyptic scenarios. These daydreams are so intense that they can shift the way they see the real world, and sometimes the way you see it too. Today, I'm going to show you 7 surreal INFJ daydreams that are controversial, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little unsettling. But trust me, they'll change how you think about the INFJ mind, and maybe even about your own. Let's dive in.
All right, first off, let's dive into the what if the world fell apart scenario. INFJs often find themselves daydreaming about a world that completely falls apart, and not in a shallow way. We're talking about society collapsing, systems breaking down, and the safety nets people depend on suddenly disappearing. To many, this sounds like a dark obsession or unnecessary fear, but to an INFJ, it's something very different. They don't dwell on destruction just for the sake of it. They imagine how humanity would rebuild from the ashes. In their inner worlds, INFJs play out vivid scenarios of how communities would reorganize, who would step up as leaders, and what values would actually survive when everything else is stripped away. They'll wonder, would kindness win in the end, or would greed and violence take over? Would they themselves rise to the challenge, or would they disappear into the chaos? These thoughts aren't random. They're almost like practice drills for the soul. Psychologically, this daydream reveals one of the INFJ's deepest drives, the search for meaning and moral truth. While most people avoid thinking about collapse because it's uncomfortable, INFJs lean into it. They want to know what human beings are really made of when the comfort is gone. It's controversial because some see it as negative or paranoid, but INFJs see it as visionary. After all, every system we rely on today was once just an idea, and they can't help but wonder how fragile or strong those ideas really are. And maybe, just maybe, these imagined disasters are not about fearing the end of the world, but about preparing to help build a better one if that day ever comes. For INFJs, the collapse isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the ultimate test of humanity's character. Next up, we've got the ideal future self. One of the most surreal daydreams INFJs often have is about meeting their perfected future self. In their imagination, this version of them is wiser, calmer, deeply impactful, and everything they believe they're meant to become. It's not just a casual thought about where I'll be in 10 years. It's a vivid and almost spiritual connection to an idealized self who embodies their highest potential. This daydream can be both inspiring and tormenting. On one hand, it acts like a guiding light. It pushes INFJs to make better choices, to refine their skills, and to live with a sense of purpose. They see this future version almost as a mentor, a symbol of what they could achieve if they keep walking the right path. It fuels their perfectionism in a way that can drive incredible growth. But here's where the controversy comes in. Some would argue this vision is actually a trap, because while INFJs are dreaming of their ideal selves, they may forget to fully embrace who they are right now. Instead of accepting their flaws and imperfections, they can become overly critical of themselves for not being there yet. This can lead to cycles of self-doubt, guilt, or the feeling of never measuring up to their own expectations. Psychologically, this shows the INFJ's deep need for transformation and growth. They are never content with staying the same. They want to evolve, and their daydreams are often a rehearsal for that evolution. It's less about escaping reality and more about shaping it, like they're sketching a blueprint of who they're destined to be. So is this daydream a blessing or a burden? That depends. For some INFJs, it becomes a source of endless motivation. For others, it becomes a weight they carry. But one thing is certain, this imagined future self is not just a dream. It's a reflection of the INFJ's relentless drive to become the best version of themselves.
And third on the list, alternate lives they could have lived. INFJs are known for their rich inner worlds, and one of their most surreal daydreams is imagining the alternate lives they could have lived. While most people might briefly wonder about the road not taken, INFJs turn it into a full cinematic experience. They'll imagine entire scenarios with vivid detail. In one reality, they might be a poet living in a quiet cabin by the sea.
In another, they could be an activist leading movements in a big city. And in yet another, they might be traveling the world, free from all attachments. These daydreams aren't fleeting. They feel almost as real as the life they're currently living. INFJs will build storylines, emotions, and even relationships within these alternate paths, creating inner worlds where they can explore identities that might never exist in reality. This isn't about dissatisfaction with their current life. It's about exploration. They want to understand how choices shape destiny, and these imagined lives give them a lens to study the human experience from multiple angles. But here's where the controversy comes in. Some people see this as a form of regret, a way of avoiding reality by clinging to what might have been. And for some INFJs, that's true. It can become bittersweet, even painful, when these visions feel more fulfilling than the life they're living now. But for many, it's not regret at all. It's a kind of psychological experiment, a rehearsal of possibilities, and sometimes even a source of guidance for what they should do next. Psychologically, this reflects the INFJ's deep desire for meaning. They're not content with just one version of life. They need to understand all the other ways it could have unfolded. And in that exploration, they often discover hidden truths about themselves, about their values, and about the future choices they still have the power to make. In the end, these alternate lives aren't just fantasies. They are a reminder that identity is flexible, destiny is not fixed, and every choice carries the potential to completely rewrite the story of who we are.
All right, fourthly, conversations that never happened. INFJs are famous for replaying conversations in their minds, but it doesn't stop at replaying. They also create entire dialogues that never actually happened. These mental scripts can include arguments they never had the courage to voice, confessions of love or pain they kept buried, or even simple thank yous they wish they had said. In their imagination, these conversations play out in vivid detail, complete with tone, body language, and emotions. On the surface, this might sound like dwelling on the past or avoiding reality, but for INFJs, it's much more complex. These inner dialogues serve as a kind of emotional processing system. They allow INFJs to explore closure when it wasn't possible in real life. They give space to unspoken truths and help them make sense of what went wrong or what could have been different. It's not just imagination, it's a rehearsal for the soul. But here's the controversial part. Sometimes these imagined conversations become so emotionally powerful that they feel more real than the actual exchanges in their lives. For some INFJs, this can be healing, offering a sense of peace or understanding they never received. For others, it can become a trap, keeping them stuck in a loop of unresolved emotions and imagined outcomes that prevent them from truly moving on. Psychologically, this habit reveals the INFJ's deep need for authenticity and connection. They crave meaningful dialogue, and when reality doesn't give it to them, their inner world fills in the gaps. These conversations reflect both their longing for truth and their tendency to idealize what communication should feel like. In the end, these daydream dialogues are more than fantasy. They're the INFJ's way of grappling with the complexity of human relationships. Sometimes they provide comfort, sometimes they stir up old wounds, but they always reveal the INFJ's deepest desire, to be understood and to truly understand others. Fifth on the list, the chosen one fantasy. One of the most surprising daydreams INFJs often keep to themselves is the chosen one fantasy. On the outside, INFJs may seem humble, quiet, even reserved, but in their inner world, they sometimes imagine themselves as someone destined for something extraordinary. It might be leading a movement, discovering hidden truths, or guiding people through a time of crisis. These daydreams aren't about showing off power or glory. They're about responsibility. To outsiders, this can look like arrogance, as if INFJs secretly believe they're more important than others, but that's not the case. For INFJs, it's less about being superior and more about being useful. They feel a pull, a kind of inner calling, that their life should mean something more than just existing. In these fantasies, they imagine what would happen if their intuition was right, if their insights really could make a difference, and if they were suddenly placed in a position where others depended on them. The psychological truth behind this is fascinating. INFJs often feel a constant tension between being ordinary and being extraordinary. On one hand, they want peace and anonymity. On the other,
They can't shake the sense that they were meant to play a role in something bigger. These chosen one daydreams are their way of exploring that tension, of seeing what it might look like if they embraced the full weight of their convictions. Of course, critics would argue that this is unrealistic, even delusional. But history shows us that many people who changed the world were once dismissed as dreamers with impossible visions. INFJs tap into this possibility through their inner stories. For them, imagining themselves as the chosen one isn't escapism. It's training. It's rehearsal. And sometimes it's even prophecy. In the end, whether these fantasies ever come true or not, they reveal a profound truth. INFJs are not content with just surviving. Deep down, they are always imagining how they could serve a bigger purpose. And whether the world is ready for it or not, they dream of being the one who steps up when it matters most.
All right, 6 on the list. The secret romance that never leaves their head. One of the most intimate and surreal INFJ daydreams is the secret romance they keep tucked away in their imagination. Unlike casual daydreaming about attraction, these inner romances are deep, detailed, and emotionally charged. An INFJ might carry a secret love for someone they've never confessed their feelings to, someone from their past who still lingers in their heart, or even a completely fictional character who embodies the qualities they long for in a partner. These aren't shallow fantasies. They are entire emotional worlds where INFJs can explore intimacy, vulnerability, and unconditional love. In their minds, these relationships feel safe, sacred, and profoundly meaningful. They imagine conversations, shared moments, even whole futures together. For them, these daydreams are not simply escapism. They are an expression of the depth and intensity of their capacity to love. Here's where it gets controversial. Sometimes these secret romances feel more real than actual relationships. An INFJ might find themselves emotionally invested in someone who doesn't even know the full extent of their feelings. Or they may compare real-life partners to the idealized bond they've created in their imagination. To some, this looks unrealistic or even unhealthy. But for INFJs, it reveals the purity of their longing. They don't just want surface-level connection. They crave a soul-level bond. Psychologically, this habit shows the INFJ's struggle between reality and idealism. They know real relationships come with flaws, conflict, and compromise, but their inner romances allow them to experience the connection they wish existed without fear of rejection or disappointment. For some, it becomes a source of hope. For others, it can lead to frustration when reality doesn't measure up to the dream. At its core, this daydream reflects how INFJs love, with intensity, with devotion, and with imagination. Even if it never leaves their head, it speaks volumes about their deepest desire, a love that feels timeless, transcendent, and utterly unforgettable. Last but not least, the vision of collective awakening. Perhaps the most surreal of all INFJ daydreams is their vision of a collective awakening. In their inner world, they often imagine a moment where humanity finally wakes up, where people shed illusions, break away from greed and corruption, and begin living with empathy, truth, and unity. It's a dream of societies that heal instead of exploit, of communities that lift each other up instead of tearing one another down. To many, this sounds naive or utopian, but to INFJs, it feels less like a fantasy and more like a possible blueprint of what the world could become. INFJs don't just dream of change. They mentally play out what it would look like if it actually happened. They imagine how education systems could transform, how relationships between nations could shift, and how ordinary people might start treating each other differently once compassion becomes the standard instead of the exception. In these inner visions, the world doesn't just function better, it feels lighter, freer, and more alive. The controversy lies in how people view this. Some dismiss it as escapism, accusing INFJs of being out of touch with reality. Others argue that these kinds of daydreams are exactly what the world needs, because every major revolution, every great cultural shift, every fight for justice started in the mind of someone who dared to imagine a better future. What looks like naive idealism from the outside is, in many ways, the seed of transformation. Psychologically, this reveals the INFJ's deep connection to hope and purpose. They aren't satisfied with the world as it is. They constantly hold space for the world as it could be. While others might scoff at their optimism, INFJs carry this vision because they believe imagination is the first step toward change.
In the end, the vision of collective awakening is more than just a dream. For INFJs, it's a calling. It's a reminder that even if the world is messy, even if change feels impossible, it has to be dreamed before it can be lived. And maybe, just maybe, their surreal daydreams aren't fantasies at all, but glimpses of a future we're not brave enough to believe in yet. So, what about you? Do any of these INFJ daydreams sound familiar? Or maybe even too familiar? Tell me in the comments which one hit you the hardest. And if you're not an INFJ, which one surprised you the most? And hey, if you want to dive deeper into the INFJ mind, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the wildest daydreams are the ones that wake us up.